Listing agent takes a listing. They're now only discussing their commission with the seller. That is it. Why would a listing agent try to sell the commission of the buyer agent? They should not be doing that. This is supposed to be uncoupled. So the buyer wants to hire a buyer agent to represent them. They have an agreement with the buyer agent. So the buyer agent and the buyer will have their own separate contract, their own separate agreement, whatever that is. And if the buyer's agent cannot do that, which is what everyone is saying will happen, no, the buyers won't pay. And the buyer agent will then have to go to the listing agent. Well, as a listing agent, why would I tell my seller to agree to that? At that point, if the buyer wants to see the house, they can come directly to me as the listing agent, and there's nothing to stop them from doing that anymore. And now they're saying, well, we have to do that because then the buyer agent won't show the house, which is what you just said. And if the buyer agent doesn't show the house, then that is a violation of the code of ethics. Because if you're really representing someone, you're supposed to be putting, especially as a fiduciary, their rights ahead of your own, right? And you are supposed to be looking out for them and showing it. And shame on you if you don't have a contract with your own client.
Okay, but I got that. But when you're saying that, I'm thinking, what about procedurally? Let's say that this injunctive relief, let's call it a loose term, a ban on offering, just like revenue, ban on offering compensation. Okay, think about this.
When you say a ban on offering compensation, you're talking about a ban on the listing agent including it in the listing agreement for the MLS purposes.
Yes, which was formerly the requirement. Let's say the requirement is no longer in place. I'm getting really slangy here. Okay, so it was
a requirement by the National Association of Realtors prior. Now it is no longer a requirement, and there's a possibility that the judge may say it may be illegal to do so.
And there's in so many ways, because this court is acting on its own. But what about later trials? I mean, that's my point. There's going to be such a groundswell.
Let's talk one thing at a time. Let's talk about that.
Okay, but I want to just talk about like the way Rebney carved out a silly mechanism where they said, they outwardly stated, New Year's Day right now just happened. They said that it's going to be a consumer issue. So the buyer has to ask the buyer's agent if there is a buyer's agent. That's the fallacy right there. Why is there a buyer's agent unless they're getting paid? So everything should never be called a buyer's agent. It's a prospective
buyer's agent. If I'm a buyer and I want representation, I'm going to hire myself a buyer's agent. And then
no. I'm talking about it's a prospective, because let's say the buyer has no intent on paying an agent. The mechanism in place states that a prospective buyer could speak to a prospective buyer's agent and ask that. Wait a minute,
you just said something different. You said if a buyer has no intention of paying a buyer agent, then they would not have a buyer agent. They would go directly to the listing agent.
No, but there's another option where if everywhere you use the Rebney model. Rebney model is as follows. I'm going to use the word perspective because it's the way it's the truth. A prospective buyer reaches a prospective buyer's agent and says, can you please, Mrs. Buyer's agent, like I'm the buyer, you're the buyer's agent, can you please find out the listing agent on that property? Can you professionally, one-to-one, reach that agent, ask that listing agent to speak to their seller, whether their seller / client, who does have a relationship, where my buyer's agent, my prospective buyer's agent, I don't have a relationship because I'm not paying. You put a piece of paper under me, and in lieu of me paying, I'm saying, can you please convey this request? Can you, professional as the other professional, like the telephone game, to go on ahead and ask the seller if he or she will skip the professionals, go right to...
So what you're saying is, the buyer contacts any agent, not knowing the difference between a seller agent or a buyer agent, and says, I would like to see a house 123 Main Street. And the buyer agent now says, well, I would be representing you as the buyer because that's not my listing. So I need you to come in and sign an agreement that says that you're going to pay me X amount for my fee. And then the buyer says, well, I don't want to do that. And the buyer.
No, but then the buyer at that moment, the buyer says, no, I don't want to. A smart prospective buyer's agent will say, okay, would you like me to ask the listing agent if their client would pay me? So we
Right,
skip.
because Rebney is saying that the buyer agent cannot make this determination and speak to the listing agent and ask for it. It has to come from the buyer. So
No,
now the
you had to
buyer agent,
reverse. You had to reverse. A listing agent can't offer money to a buyer's agent, but a buyer can ask the buyer's agent, ask the listing agent to the seller.
but only if the buyer is asking for that, right?
Or any convolution. Maybe you can say, hey, you don't have to pay me, but I'll see if they'll pay me. So that means the seller at a closing would give money to a buyer's agent. So yes, it would be reflected on the RESPA and all that. I mean, that's way past me, the government regulations, but it would not be professional to professional. They're asking for seller party to pay buyer's agent representative. That's what we're talking about. Now, so you just talked about, but here's the difference. That procedure is in place in New York City.
That's
what
correct.
we're talking about here, which is, a long, far, what is the word? A far stretch, is if it's in Nevada and there's an outright ban on the offer of compensation, or let's say Westchester, where I'm from, there's no mechanism. You know the way right now, before the ban, so to speak, if you know the way a listing agent is required to hear all offers, and they can definitely deal professionally, and there's no such thing as, hey, I sent you a written offer, fax, phone, email, text, and you didn't respond. Okay, that's now. When there's no more right, tell me this. If you're a prospective buyer and you speak to a prospective agent, and the prospective agent calls, there's no obligation on the part of the listing agent. I was getting all to this. Here's the punchline. The listing agent does not any longer have to entertain that offer. Just because you ask doesn't mean my client doesn't want to hear any stories. They don't want any requests. They don't want any opposition. They don't want to pay for any opposition. They don't want a repair credit, or my friend said a punch list. We don't want fix the window. We don't want that. So if someone really wants,
I don't agree with you. I think that the listing agent and the seller will want to hear the offer. They just don't want to have to pay the buyer agent, and they're no longer required to.
But we're not even talking. We're not making an offer of money for the property. The threshold issue is, will you please pay my agent? If the answer is no, we're not going. Right. But I was talking procedurally. Will you pay my agent? But I'm saying there's no obligation to the part of the listing agent even return that call anymore.
Here's what's happening, Scott, is we're asking people in the industry that very question. Will you pay the buyer agent? And I'm saying, if I'm the listing agent, why would I? Why would I recommend that my seller pay an additional $1,000, $5,000, $10,000, $40,000, whatever the number is? Why would they pay anything when I can tell the seller, we don't have this in the listing. We are not obligated to pay the buyer agent to bring their buyer. We're not paying a finder's fee. So if they want representation, let them get their own agent and pay their own agent. If they want to see the house and not have representation, they can come directly to us. And I will be more than happy to show the house. And maybe as a listing agent, I might even say, I will charge you a little bit more. But it's not going to be as much as the buyer's agent.
Okay. And I think the relationship between a listing agent and a seller is so close, they could say, look, it's my recommendation. We don't have too many chefs spoil the broth. So we got this done. The buyer loves the house. We say, no, we won't pay anyone, but do you like the house? Come by, this system already existed. A person in New York State could just be a customer. They don't have to have dual agency. They don't.
They could come and they could come directly to me as the listing agent. And why would I have to?
So, all of this discussion was just to dispel my friend's remark that it's a good idea to explain to the seller why to pay a buyer.
It was a good idea before all these lawsuits, and everyone is sort of stuck in that era right now of this is what we've always done, and it makes sense to do it this way. We spoke to someone just yesterday who not only is a real estate broker, but also an attorney. And she said, Well, if we don't offer any kind of compensation to the buyer agent won't the buyer won't see the house because the buyer agent won't show it to them. Well, that doesn't hold water anymore. You see, that used to happen before. Buyers were loyal to their agent because they didn't have to worry about paying their agent. They didn't realize that it was already built in. They just went along and they said, I'm going to pay it anyway, so I might as well go with the person that I chose, that I would like to show this house. I would like to see this house with.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not the case anymore. Now it's okay. We're not offering anything. So if the buyer wants to see the house, they have two options. One, they can hire an agent to go and pay that agent to represent them and come and see the house, which a lot of people may not be willing to do. Or they can go directly to the listing agent.
Right. I mean, there is room to get enough skill. I just read some articles someone wrote, and it's pretty interesting. He said buyer's agents now, this should not be a problem if you're honest and really good at your job.
Absolutely.
Made me think, if you're not interested in only getting paid through a baked in financed option, if you could just give your value like everyone else in the world. So that this smart guy just said, it's not a problem if you're honest and really good at your job. If you're not, I mean, you have to hide it. But, you know, we discuss, this part is law of the land, little quick title, where everyone we come across is ignoring these antitrust statutes and a verdict from Halloween. Today's the 24th of January. So I say, wait a minute, why does this federal law basically not count, but RESPA counts, the Code of Ethics counts, the bankruptcy code counts.
Right. I'm going to pick and choose which law I'm going to
I mean,
follow.
why do we have, you got to have a lead paint. I mean, is lead paint even a thing? There hasn't been lead paint since 1978. We're going on 50 years, and we have to have a closing today that needs lead paint disclosure. I mean, and there's no way to know what's under 5 coats of paint anyway. So, you know, it's anything new in 50, anything that's less than 50. So we're focusing on these things where broker owners, lead paint. Has there ever been a lead paint police that comes after a closing and so you have a lead paint? It's crazy. But this law for somehow is being, given short shrift. There are attorneys, I can't tell you who, I spoke to attorneys who say the matter's not settled. And I said, how are you disregarding a verdict, impending cases, DOJ investigations, stated intentions? So it seems, we've talked about this, no leadership and social media pundits. But
all arrows point to the fact that this will be going into effect. Once the judge comes down and says this, there is a very strong possibility this will be going into effect. So my question is, why is everyone not getting prepared? What's the worst case scenario? It doesn't happen, which is pretty slim to none, but let's say it doesn't happen. So what? Now you just upped your game. I've always been saying that. If you can demonstrate your value as a buyer's agent to a buyer, and you can demonstrate your value as a listing agent to a seller, you are better than most of the agents out there, because most of them know how to demonstrate their value to a seller, but not to a buyer. What's the downside of going in the direction of where the law is?
Well, the downside is rejection. The downside is asking for someone.
It's not rejection. Because if you are skilled and you know how to do it, you don't care if there's rejection, because when you go on a listing, there may be rejection, but you're skilled, you know how to do it, and most of the time you are getting the listing. So the few times that you don't care about that, because you know what, they didn't see, you guys weren't on the same page. It's okay. Next I'm going to move on to something else because I know my value as an agent.
I mean, the difference between a sale and a purchase, as you know, is it's about scarcity. The seller only cares about one house. They know and they know they'll sell. It's just a matter of price, the price. Whereas a buyer thinks they have to run around because there's opportunities lost. So that's why it's an urgency versus where buyers are not expecting to slow down at all. They want to see something within the hour.
As an agent should still bring that skill to the table and say, this is what I do for you. And this is what it will cost you. And this is where my experience comes in. This is where my lack of experience comes in, because I haven't done this that often. This is what I charge. This is, I'm on this team. This is, what I charge for this. If I show you X amount of houses, this is what I charge. If I'm showing you a house at this price, this is what I charge. It doesn't matter. But if
No, you're
you
right, but
house,
everything you just said is
everything
more than the big brokers, the box companies, the boards, the associations, the organization. I mean, this isn't done at education conferences. This isn't done on a board-wide basis. If there's a lunch and learn, you eat your food and you go back to work. I mean, you're not going to save your career while you're lunching and learning. It's just so it's really not done.
What's not done?
So
Learning
this
how
type
to
of this type of teaching, this type of
because it's
indoctrination.
never been done before. Because we had the commission in the listing agent, in the
Right.
listing contract,
Mm-hmm.
and that was determined by the listing agent. Why would a listing agent ever need to determine what somebody else's income is? As a buyer agent, whether this is law or not, I want to be in control of my own income. This is my value. This is my worth. If I'm representing you, this is why you should be paying me a fee. I'm worth it, or maybe I'm not worth it. If I'm not worth it, then get out of the business. If you want to do this, do it the right way.
Or you could be worth it and your compensation is commensurate with your ability. And let's say you are
Absolutely.
a good one, but not
Which
a
is
great
exactly what the lawsuit, used in the courtroom, right? Didn't Catchmark say, how is it possible that someone who got their license last Tuesday is charging the same amount or making the same amount as somebody who's been in the business for 45 years?
Well, because he knew the elements and he knew the chief arguments from the Department of Justice, and they don't want inexperience to be rewarded because that is a restraint of trade and a price fixing. It's literally price fixing. They're fixing the amount. So I got that, and what was making me crazy, and you and I are having, I'll speak for myself, no success in getting any kind of ancillary service providers to bite. I mean, they don't, everyone we speak to, it's just colloquial. These are friends. They said, oh, no one's talking about that. No one's acting like that.
It's going away. The lawsuit's not real. It's going away. There's going to be a workaround. We don't see why buyers would have to pay. The seller, it would be in the best interest for the seller to continue to do that. Well, that might be a violation of the law. So the seller may not be able to do that.
But I think that every provider that works with realtors should want to champion that realtor, get them as competent as they can so they stay in the business, they can maintain their business relationship. What would these companies like banks that are heavily reliant upon realtor referrals, what are they going to do if the realtors cannot be necessarily involved in any deal? I mean, if they're basically fighting for their way to stay inside a deal,
right? What will happen? I mean, I think your question is, what will happen when the judge comes back and says this will now be a violation? You cannot put the buyer commission in the listing agreement. They want this uncoupled. And if the buyer's agent does not have the ability to go ahead and demonstrate their value and have that agreement signed between buyer agent and buyer, then they don't have a client. And that client will most likely go, or prospective client, right? Because they wouldn't be a client at that point, would go directly to the listing agent. And everyone who is relying on the business of that buyer agent is now in the same situation because no business is coming in because they don't have the ability to do that. Which is why I've been saying, I don't understand why everyone has their head in the sand, why everyone is yelling and screaming about this. Just up your game. As a professional, don't you want to be the best professional out there? I would be practicing this every single day. We have this runway from now until the judge comes and says this is what it's going to be, where everyone is kind of looking the other way.
And keep in mind, there is really a runway because the class members are in Missouri and Kansas. So that would not affect Florida. However,
until the copycat lawsuit hits Florida.
Exactly. And then there's trends. And then the chief defendant, NAR, wants to say, okay, we're 0-1. Now we have to fight this with an appeal if it's possible. And then the onslaught and the onslaught. And listen, everyone wants a piece of their pie now. Now people are just suing, and we'll see what happens.
Well, if I was an
Uh,
attorney, I'd be doing the same thing. This is easy money now. They were
well,
already had
it's
it in.
ethical. The only thing a lawyer can't do is bring in a matter that's frivolous. If it has merit, then they can. I mean, these sellers.
Look,
It
this
seems
is,
that the
it's been found, violative of antitrust.
Mhm.
There's so many, things here between buyer and seller. Just uncouple the commission
Well,
and
the
up your
standard is
game.
very low. Think about the burden of proof. We say the burden of proof. I don't even know if there is a burden of proof. There's no burden of production or proof. I mean, you don't have to prove anything. It just has to be that it happened. Was your address sold through MLS? Yes. Was your compensation offered? Yes. That's the threshold. So that means
Mhm.
how many people a week are potential class members?
Right.
Hundreds, thousands, everywhere, right? Oh, this many closings in last quarter. Got it. Last quarter of 2023. Got it. Also, there's this, seems that trust is under attack. Okay, if I was going to go to a new location, where's the best pizza place? Where's the pediatrician? Where's golf course? Where's a nice restaurant? Where can I go? What should I do here if you live in a new location, Kentucky or Maine? So within a real estate deal, they say, oh, here's the person you could work with, these painters, these other movers, inspectors, and so on. If the professionals are out of the business, if they're doing far less representation, then it's going to be far more digital, far more consumer direct, far more internet leads to lenders. I mean, the human biz part of it is going to be gone. I mean, because if you don't have a person as a liaison or as a kind of hand holder, then people are going to be left who are completely clueless, just like, I would not know how to, do things. People don't know how to travel. They don't know how to buy a car. They don't know how to buy a house. It was a big stretch for me to enroll my daughters in school. I was looking around. I fortunately, I looked so pathetic.
And if
And
there was
someone,
someone that said, "Hey, Scott, I specialize in this. Let me sit down with you and show you exactly what I
Mhm,
do. And this is what it will cost you. And this is why you should hire me today." You would probably have done that.
definitely.
And that is my whole point. So why turn away from this? Why say, no, it's not happening? No, there's going to be a workaround there. Why would you want a workaround? Why would you not want to step up your game and be better
But
at what
listen,
you do to
stepping up your
represent
game
the
is
client?
stepping up your game is hard.
No, it's
There,
not for somebody who's really in this business for real, knows their value, knows how to do it. I think the smartest agents and brokers out there right now are working on this, and they are learning how to do it, and they're using this time as that runway to practice for when the judge turns around and says, this is how it's going to be. It is no longer
you
allowed.
believe that. You think that's happening while NAR is saying two words.
I think it's very, very few people that are doing that. Very few. And I
Okay, so
think
yeah,
that
I think it's almost nobody doing, because they're being told that we'll appeal, and to
right.
the layperson, to the common person who hasn't done any evaluation of what the appeals process is and how likelihood that the entities will participate or could, or even if they were, would they prevail, because they haven't looked at the standard. And one thing that I read yesterday is
But wouldn't
that
you agree that a smart agent or smart broker would be setting themselves up to get ahead of the change so that when the change occurs, their business does not hit any bumps? While
right, a
everyone will
smart,
be running around
I
like,
mean, yeah,
how to
I
pay.
think that it's unfortunately it's too few people are taking that step, but I think it's going to be a possible or incumbent upon those people that want to gain more market share. They can learn the methods, the strategies, the proper approach to reach prospective clients, demonstrate their value, assist the client in a fiduciary capacity, because people have this need and it's not going to be met. So, I mean, there are courses, there are certification opportunities for
Mhm.
people to learn and say, wait a minute, I can, just an example, I'll get you a new roof. I'll get you a little closing costs. I'll provide some value, and even just being here for you in case the other side says some crazy stuff that we're going to close in 9 months.
That's
You,
right.
if they say we're going to close in 9 months, you might think you're going to close in 9 months, and your representative, your realtor, could say, no, 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 no. Now think about it. That's when a realtor's worth their money, because if you don't have a place to live and your landlord says get out, or your closing on your own house is delayed by 9 months, or let's say 4 months, something reasonable that could happen, Now, really, anything you pay for representation as an advocate, as a guard dog, is worth it. There are many cases.
There's many ways to show value as a real estate agent, and people are looking for representation. Some may not need as much representation as others. Some may only want guidance, but they want something. And I think, and I'm going to ask you again, would you not agree that if you are a professional in this business, that you would be using a buyer representation agreement and practicing on getting 100% of that commission put into that agreement?
Absolutely. Sure.
And we just created a webinar we put together that where we invited agents across the country in all different states that are successfully working buyer representation agreements and using this time as the runway, because these are the agents, and mark my words, when this happens, these are the agents that will be thriving. They will not have a single bump in the road. That is a smart agent. I would rather follow someone like that, that's doing it and watching what's going on with the lawsuits, seeing what the judges are saying, following what's happening, seeing what DOJ's position is. Because if you're following all of that, you can clearly see the direction that this is going in. This is not rocket science. You can look at it, see where it's going, and prepare so that you are not caught unaware when it happens.
Right. And there's so many protections that would be available to a buyer and opportunities to get in on a property that is right for them. They should, we're discounting the possibility that people may want to really, really invest in their future, in the equity, in the appreciation, in their kids' education, or in their just happiness in the home. I mean, I should say it's a bad word, manipulation of buyer agent compensation precluded people paying what they might value. You hear you get what you pay for. They may not have treated agents so well because it's free. They may have not understood their services.
That is changing. I see this as a very strong positive, where agents can now determine exactly what they're going to make. They're not relying on a listing agent. They're not relying on any of it. And the shift will take place. It probably won't be easy for buyers to realize, oh my goodness, I have to pay for this now. But the truth is they were always paying for it. And someone who can articulate that properly, it's not going to be that difficult if you know what you're doing. And that is what will separate the ones that stay in the business and the ones that will go running away. This is not an easy business. It's not a get rich quick scheme. It never has been. Now, were there times that the market, might have been a little bit easier for people to get into? Yeah. But right now, I think this is the best thing that can happen, because this will show who has staying power. And those who are turning away and pretending that this isn't happening, they're probably going to have a very hard time. And it's very sad to watch that, because I'm very surprised at what I'm hearing. Well, that's the way it's always been done. That's the way it will continue to be done. We don't have a problem, but you're about to have a problem. All you have to do is follow what's going on. Look at there's numerous lawsuits on this. I mean, Catchmark just filed a $200 billion lawsuit. There's tons of other lawsuits that followed. Every day there's another one that's coming out in every other state. This is happening. So if you're not prepared, you're going to be horribly disappointed when this comes down.
And on another level, if a broker seizes the opportunity to keep their agents extremely well instructed and more desirable, it's going to be a win for everyone. A broker could attract individuals that want to take on this new challenge, that want to get better, and actually take a lot of market share, because they're known as the ones that can deliver much, much more value. The money might become irrelevant.
This is your time to shine as an agent. Go out there and show your value. Practice while you can. Get it done. There are agents that are doing it, and they'll be on that panel. And I'm really happy that we're doing this webinar and we have these agents that are coming on and they're sharing what is working. How do you handle these objections? Because we've not done this, to its fullest extent. So why not listen to the agents that have been doing it long before this became an issue with any kind of lawsuits? Those are the ones that really know what they're doing, and they're peers of the other agents. So listen to what they have to say and take your business to the next level by being prepared. Wayne Dyer used to say, if you're looking for a reason to be angry in this world, the world will never disappoint you. So if you're an agent walking around angry about these lawsuits and doing all kinds of, rants here and there, the world will not disappoint you, and you'll have lots of people cheering you on because negative news sells. But you know what? Get into the mindset of abundance and say, hey, this is my opportunity to shine, to show the world who I am as a real estate agent, as a real estate broker, and how I can best represent buyer or seller and really take my business to the next level. This is a great opportunity.
It's an exciting time. And for those professionals who have been doing a great job, this is the opportunity to really even stand out more.
Totally agree. So thank you.
All right. Talk more. Thank you.